So your objective is to help students analyze character and use supporting evidence when they analyze the character, and also to help the students retell a plot and retell a story using evidence also when they retell and analyze the parts of a story, culminating in this paragraph that we read. So while you're doing shared reading, what are some of the whole group and individual activities that kids do that lead up to this paragraph?
Okay, as we're reading the book and the different characters are introduced, the main characters, we completed a bubble map. And so the students are looking at Fern and they're thinking about, what happens in the story, that evidence from the text, and they're adding adjectives to this bubble map to describe that character. So, for example, they said Fern. This one says she's caring and she's loving. And those two words are kind of similar. So then she's added the evidence from the text. Is once Wilbur goes to visit, to live at Mr. Zuckerman's farm, she says, Fern visits Wilbur every day. So that's her evidence from the text to support why she chose those adjectives.
So you've got then, here we have kind, and it says Fern works hard. Determined. She has determined and she has persistent. So then outside of the bubble, it says Fern works hard to talk her dad into letting her keep Wilbur. So she says, this is my word, and then outside of the adjective, she has the evidence.
Right. So this is going to help them to think about those character traits that eventually, by the end of the story, when they've added these, because we add these throughout the book, as we read and we find out more information, we add something else about that character.
You know what's neat about this also? I don't like using the word neat. But you know what I like about this? Is they're reading for a purpose.
Right.
They're looking, you've told them, as I read out loud, I want you to listen for traits you would use to describe them. So they have some, and then you've given them something to hold their thinking.
Right.
To make what they're thinking visible. So a student might say, he's sweet. Well, he might think it and the thought goes away. But by giving them something to hold that thinking, it helps them later go back and transfer it into a more sophisticated piece.
Right, because in a story you have character development, and it's not all going to happen at the very beginning. So as we add, they're thinking about what it is in the story that made me know that's that character's traits.
Exactly.
So then when they go to complete their character award, they can look at it and say, okay, these are all the things about this character, and then I've got to choose, looking at the evidence from the text, which character I think most deserves the character traits based on their character traits themselves and what they did in the story that made them have that trait.
Right, so they're using the evidence that they've accumulated through listening, through taking notes, and through listening to then support a claim. So this is work that they're going to be doing really for the next 8-10 years of their academic life, and hopefully even longer, that you're sort of setting the groundwork for in second grade. So what else are you doing to help them hold their thinking and read for a purpose to lead to this?
After we've read each chapter, or maybe every few chapters, we complete a summary chart. And they're already created, so it has chapter 1, 2, 3. And they're going to write a summary for each chapter. This is going to be a few sentences quickly of the main events in that chapter. They have to be able to determine which ones are the main events or which ones aren't so important. They have to think about what that main event in there that was so important to the story, to be able to write the summary for each chapter. As they're going throughout the book, they are going to do one for every chapter, which is going to eventually help them to retell the story.
Now, I'm assuming in the beginning you probably modeled a lot of the chapter summaries. Do they eventually do that independently?
Yes, it starts with a shared writing. We write it on the board, and we're thinking out loud as I'm writing and recording on the board, and they are writing in their notebooks. And some students put it in their words, and some students copy exactly what you write. But as you go, you're going to guide them towards being able to do that on their own.
And, summarizing is one of those research strategies that have shown that really help students learn. So the more that they learn that skill of researching, of summarizing, that's going to be able to, they're going to apply that even to their science and their social studies.
Right.
So now, summarizing and retelling can be difficult for students. Were there anything you did to help lay the groundwork for that?
Well, in our first unit, when we read Sarah Plain and Tall, we worked on some main idea. And main idea is pretty much telling what it's mostly about. So it's getting towards that summarizing. In the story Sarah Plain and Tall, the chapters are listed with their page numbers, but there's no title for each chapter like most chapter books have.
It's like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3.
Right. And so within each chapter, they had to develop a title to name that chapter. So they have to pretty much think about what is that chapter mostly about to come up with the main idea to be able to name each chapter. Eventually moving them towards within the second novel of going a little more detail of picking out the most important events, not necessarily just one main idea. So we move to summarizing.
And again, all of this is posted on the Prezi, but some of the chapter titles are Writing Letters, Singing with Sarah, Maine and Prairie Dunes, Learning to Swim. So they're identifying what are the key events, the key not detail, but the key summary of this in just a few words. And that really sort of preparing them for the type of thinking you want them to do for the summarizing.
For them to really be able to determine what is most important and what's not.
And both of these, you're giving them a purpose. You're saying, as you read, I want you to think about what is a good title. And as you read, I want you to think about how are you going to summarize it. So they're not just listening, but they're listening with an intent to be able to do something.
Right.
And something, again, to hold their thinking.
So this activity of summarizing each chapter is going to lead up to another activity that's kind of an ongoing and culminating activity of creating Wilbur's scrapbook. And so we talked about this, what a scrapbook is, and how they're telling the key events of a person's life through a scrapbook. So this is going to help them to be able to create the scrapbook. So for each scrapbook page, it's whatever they put on this for chapters 1, 2, and 3. This is chapters 1, 2, and 3. And they're going to draw a picture and have a caption for each chapter. And eventually, throughout the book, they have one for each summary chart to retell Wilbur's story and all the major events in his life. So this is the student's retelling of the story.
Okay, so the standards are they have to be able to retell it. You've given them this sort of instruction and scaffolding, and then they're able to produce something.
Right.
Something that they can share.
And this retelling is going to include all those story structure components, like it talks about his problem and solution and some of the cause of that. That's all going to be embedded within this retelling.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We're going to look at next how your assessments have changed from the previous year to this year with Common Core.